What's up, everybody? Andrew Cooper here, Alarm Fantasy Football. No Howard Bender. He's off doing baseball. John and Pemba is steeped in basketball still. So guess what? We get to run the show ourselves, bring in whoever we want. And right now, with all the crazy free agency going on, all the movement, I'm bringing in one of the great thinkers, somebody who can think on the fly since he's only had 2 days now to digest a million movements and trades here. Mr. Josh Larky, dude, a guy that I always appreciate not only having on for discussions, but I love listening to you, man. Like you do a 4-hour show with Matt Kelly, I'm listening to all 4 hours. Like that's my take on the Josh Larky. So without further ado, man, how you doing?
Andrew, thanks for having me. I'm excited for this. We have I believe your words were we actually have some really good free agency and trade discussions to have. And I agree. It's not manufactured content, folks. 2024 actually gave us some big players on the move. I'm ready to chat.
Yeah, before we get into it, I got to ask, do you think that with this year's legal tampering period, do you think the cap going up really is what's driving this? Or maybe, the teams are realizing that there's some leniency in who you can talk to and when, and they're a little more bullish on getting these deals done. I mean, like, what are your thoughts on what's driving? Because I mean, I run the tracker at Fantasy Alarm. There's no question there have been more deals this year than in years past. So what do you think's driving that?
I think the cap's a big one. That's
Yeah.
basically giving each team 1 to 3 more players to sign in free agency. So, there's some interesting league factors going on, or teams looked at how some teams rebuilt so quickly and think, oh, that could be us, the Texans, the Packers. But I think it's most likely just cap goes up, spending goes up.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, man. Not to mention, like, some of the early levies have broken too. Like sometimes we get hung. I mean, at tackle, for instance, we're kind of hung up on Tyron Smith, and a lot of tackles haven't moved. But this year, like, the running back levy broke so early that they're all signing. So it's great news for us. So typically on the show, we've been having a guest on every Wednesday, and we do 3 segments. The first one is news and rumors typically, but everything is news right now. So we're actually just going to skip through that. The second segment, what we've been doing is kind of real quick. I want Fantasy Alarm members to learn from our guests, learn a little bit about their process, and maybe if you can sneak them some tricks, that'd be great. And then we take, that mindset and we attack whatever the topic of the day is. So like last week it was the combine, we had Derek Brown on. This week it's free agency. So from your standpoint, Lucky, I want to ask you, this is a big one for me because after football ends, we all kind of go in different directions and do different things. Some people are at the Senior Bowl. Some people are doing free agency like myself. Some people like Dave Kluge came on and said he's going for hikes and he's just hanging out. So like for you, once fantasy football ended in 2023, what's your calendar like? Let's say from then until we get up to the draft or so. What are you getting into?
Yeah, once February hits, that's when I begin prospecting. I don't watch college football. I don't have time to watch college football during the season. And I think it's important to not just analyze the prospects statistically, but also watch a little bit of film. It helps with player and style comps in particular. And it just also helps you understand how to just watch the game better on Sundays as well, when you're starting to identify college players that may or may not have what it takes to get to the next level. If you're watching even just some game film, that helps you understand what people mean when they say, this guy looks like he's going to be better in college than the NFL. Oh, what does that mean? Well, if you start to watch him, you realize how, all right, I see these incredible stats, but then when I'm actually watching him, this doesn't look like someone who's truly a superior athlete, a truly superior talent to those around him. So watch some college football on these prospects. I do a lot of analytical prospecting. I have a master's in analytics. That's how I kind of broke into the industry. So I think I'd be remiss not to do anything analytical in that sense. March, the combine info gets added into my process. I have a lot of placeholders for projected 40 times, estimated heights and weights. And then April's the same thing. As we get closer to the draft, we get better estimates on draft capital. Sometimes we get some new pro day info. And that's also just a good time for me to kind of finalize my pre-draft dynasty rankings and analysis on kind of the players' team situations and what their needs should and might be up to that NFL draft.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big analytics guy myself, and I love to do it the way you do it. Is I look at the numbers, and then I go in and watch and see how it matches up. Because I'll tell you, like some things, like broken tackles, for instance, it does not every broken tackle is created equally, right? Sometimes you're running a guy over. Sometimes it's a guy gets a hand on him and then he gets 70 yards after the contact. It's like you got to go in and see what that looks like. So I'm fully on board with that, man. Some people think you can just do it in the spreadsheet, but I think it's important to go in and watch too, right?
Yeah, one thing I'll add is that the level of competition in college varies so drastically game to game. And I don't really care if a quarterback or receiver blows up and has a huge game against a ton of future accountants. I'm like, cool, these guys are going to be accountants one day. They're not NFL players in any fashion. Great, that's wonderful. Show me what you can do against players that are either really, really good in college or against some players that might end up having an NFL future. And I think that's kind of different in the NFL, where in the NFL, everyone's just really, really good. And you might be like, oh my God, it's the Lions. Exploitable pass defense. It's still a requisite level of good. College
Right.
football really, really just doesn't even have that.
It's this is like the permanent all-star game. That's what the NFL
Yeah.
is, right? And to your point, you're not the only one doing that. An example of that would be the Chargers. They went out and they were looking for a cornerback and watching tape on all these guys, and they kept seeing Josh Palmer go out and make plays against like Emmanuel Sanders. I'm sorry, Emmanuel. Geez, who was the cornerback they ended up drafting there? It was the I don't know why
I
I
know
got
what
stuck
you're talking
on
about.
Emmanuel. Yeah, but they went out and saw him making all these plays against pretty much all the corners that got drafted, and they said, "We'll take this guy too." Right. So
Mhm.
when you look at the level of competition, that's a huge part of it, man. So I love that. As far as and Herm's great comment here. Step 1, season ends. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, profit. That's what we're trying to get from you. So if we right, it's like well, I'm asking everybody that comes on, like, hey, what's your calendar like? What can we take from you and what can we look forward to in your offseason content specifically? Because not every single person is going to write, here's my top 5 free agent moves. I write a ton of free agent stuff, so I haven't even got really into the prospects yet. So what like for you, can you give us something that you feel gives you an advantage in Dynasty? And it can be anything. It can be like guys you try and trade, little tricks you use in trades. It could be profiles you look for, profiles you avoid. Like what's something that you've had tons of success in? Whether even if it's just like, okay, I take this type of player and I throw them away every single time. Is there something you can give us, our fantasy line members here?
Yeah, two things. One, if you're going to make trades that seem lateral, always get the younger player, no matter what. There's just more upside there. I see a lot of people that make trades that look pretty lateral in terms of the type of production you're getting. And one guy happens to be 2 years younger. And people sometimes would be like, oh, like who do you think won the trade? And if I don't know who won the trade, the person who had, in terms of just glancing at the two players statistically or what we might project, the younger player, that side wins. There's just simply more upside in having potentially more years of a player's career. And then another one is I like to think I was one of the earlier adopters in considering all but a couple running backs as 1 to 2 year window guys for Dynasty. I think outside of like a Bijan Robinson, Brees Hall, Jameer Gibbs, there's generally like 3 to 6 running backs at any time that we should look at outside of just a 1 to 2 year window. Everyone else, I think we should look at in that window. It's going to help you avoid using a lot of significant capital on them in trades. And outside of occasionally selecting them highly in rookie drafts, I'm just trying to have barely enough starting viable running backs. I think a lot of people talk about zero RB for redraft, but then in Dynasty, they start to get a little bit squeamish. And the way that I think about it is my Dynasty bench should be young wide receivers who might pop and injury away running backs. I only want 2 running backs that I think are producing each week. If I need another one, maybe I can trade for a guy. But I think too many people out there get really hung up on, oh, I'm gonna send it's just an okay receiver and a second round pick. And now I've got my running back. And they don't realize what they're doing each time in terms of something happens to that running back, he gets hurt. If you're doing those types of trades, this isn't a guy that probably has the elite ceiling. So I'm really trying to bargain bin whenever possible outside of rookie drafts. And looking at that 1 to 2 year window is super, super important. So we'll talk about some of those guys actually pretty shortly in terms of running backs where I'm like, guys, this dude is about to end up on a lot of my dynasty rosters. So I'll make this actionable when we talk about running backs. And I go, this is truly someone that I'm making sure to get on my dynasty teams.
Perfect. And that's why this segment sets up the next segment. I'm trying to get into your mind a little bit, and then we'll say, okay, here's where we're coming from, and this is where we're going to. And I love like with the running back talk, I mean, that also speaks towards landing spot because some people ignore it, some people don't. My thought process is for running back, it matters a little bit because the entirety of their relevant career is going to be spent with that team. Whereas wide receiver and quarterback, not so much because I mean, by the time look at AJ Brown, for example, like people hated the landing spot, but by the time he got to the age apex, he was already into a better team with a better quarterback. So things to think about for
Mhm.
sure from that standpoint. Not to mention, you know, there's it's easier, honestly, to in the modern era to trade for running backs in Dynasty. It used to be impossible. Now, actually, I look at it and people get so worried about these guys falling off a cliff that it's actually not that hard to look at a team that's struggling and say, "Hey, man, I need that running back from you." Right? So,
Mhm.
I definitely the core should be built around your wide receivers. We got a lot of news to get into. So, what I want to ask here is the dynasty format. We're going to go into the news. What's the dynasty format that lives in your head? So, because some people play single QB, some people play standard, some people play super flex, some people will play tight end premium. So, when
Mhm.
we go through these players, what is the format that you think of when you're kind of looking at guys?
I generally think of super flex PPR. So we're starting two quarterbacks and receivers are going to be pretty important in that format. Even if you move down to half PPR, receivers still really important. But I generally just stick with PPR. I like scoring fantasy points. I don't know who doesn't. So why not choose a pretty common format where there's a lot of fantasy points? And I think what's nice there too is that when you bring in the tight end premium, it doesn't fully change how to value tight ends. If
Right.
you're playing half PPR and tight ends get PPR, I mean, Andrew, you're the tight end guy. You know this. If you're playing half PPR and then a tight end gets PPR, oh boy, 50 receptions by your tight end is suddenly 100 catches.
Right.
But if you're playing PPR with the 1.5, 50 tight end catches is now 75 receiver catches. The math is pretty different and it makes some tight ends good, but the last thing that I like is when a 50 catch tight end is suddenly performing like a 100 catch receiver. So that's why
It's
I
nice.
am less
Yeah.
of a fan of the half PPR tight end premium. So hopefully everyone out there heard that and thought, "Oh crap, do I really want half of these tight ends out there, so like half these starting dudes suddenly looking like 100 plus catch guys?" I don't think you do. I don't think you
Yeah,
do.
exactly. You got to keep that in mind. It doesn't raise I try to explain that exact thing to people, Josh, and you put it into great wording there is that changing to premium really just elevates the difference making crew, and you still have the glob of guys here. If you wanted to make it so that more tight ends are uh, being eligible and being in rosters, what you actually have to do is not only go tight end premium, but you need to add a second flex or a third flex. That's what brings more tight ends into the mold, right? That's what brings the tight end 15 into a guy you can start because even with the tight end premium, you're probably still starting a running back or wide receiver in the flex if you're competing, right? So you really,
Mhm.
it's a combination of the two if you want to really bring tight end back to prominence. And honestly, people think that like I'm a big like Brock Bowers guy, which I am, but for me, I still like positional scarcity is great and all. But for me, I always go for guys that can be the number one flex player in my format, which, if it's not tight end premium, a tight end has never been the number one flex player, right? There, forget positional scarcity. CD Lamb scoring 400 points last year in PPR is way more valuable than any tight end you could have had at the flex or even in your tight end spot. So just a little something on that. But let's get to what people came for. Let's look at the free agency. Tons of news here. We know the format. Let's just kind of go through. And honestly, Josh, I'm here to pick your brain. So we're going to go through and I'll name some contracts and you can talk as long or as little about that player and we'll move on as quickly or stay, we can talk for as long as you want. We're trying to keep it to an hour. So first one, biggest name, Kirk Cousins to the Falcons, man. What do you think about that, dude?
So I think for Cousins, probably a low end fantasy QB1 type. That's kind of what he's been, where you sort of need high pass volume and or efficiency from him. I think at the very least he's going to be efficient. It would be hard not to when you have a reasonable offensive line. Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney, who we'll talk about shortly. I think in terms of how this affects the other players is more interesting since Cousins, great. Thank you. You think he's the QB 11 to 15 type. There's a few guys like that. Cool. Let's talk about Bijan. I think this locks him in as a first round fantasy pick. I I know some people out
Huge.
there were still a little bit confused as to why he was suddenly just a true first round pick, and this is why it's the quarterback upgrade. Cousins is also not a mobile quarterback that increases the check down potential for
Well,
Bijan Robinson's
he wasn't
targets.
mobile. He wasn't mobile before, and he just tore his Achilles. He's going to be the least mobile
Yeah,
quarterback in the league, right?
there's going to be a lot of check downs,
Yeah,
and Bijan was also getting schemed a ton of pass game targets to begin with last year. So if you get those plus the check downs now, oh boy,
Trey Bone.
Drake London, I'd say he's a round 2, round 3 turn pick now.
Yeah.
He was going in the 4th round. I was a little bit worried about that this past month in best ball, just because they really needed Kirk Cousins specifically. And I was like, I don't know if I want to hitch my wagon to a receiver where we pretty much need one quarterback for him to pay off. Folks, we got that one quarterback. This is very exciting. We've seen what Cousins has done throughout his career with number 1 receivers. It's not just Justin Jefferson. Pretty much whoever's their number 1 pass catcher for Cousins, good chance at the yardage spike, the touchdown spike. And then Kyle Pitts, I think we should put him as a round 4, round 5 pick, kind of where he's been the past couple of years. He started to fall off from that this year, and I think we need to kind of boost him back there. And well, I don't think he's most likely going to be the tight end 1 on fantasy, since he's going to be the 3rd option in this offense behind Bijan and Drake London. You can still get a 900,000 yard season from Pitts with 6 or 7 touchdowns. And next, he's the tight end 2, tight end 3, and a real difference maker. So I'm excited about that. And then, of course, anything happens to Drake London. And then next, we're looking at TJ Hawkinson type production from Kyle Pitts, but a slightly better athlete in Pitts. So I'm definitely, I'd say most bullish on Kyle Pitts compared to the market is where I think I'll end up being.
Yeah. The rare occasions that we do get 3 players on the same team getting 100 plus targets, it doesn't look like people would picture a lot of times. It often involves a running back. Like, so you had Saquon, Evan Ingram, Odell Beckham one year. You had Matt Forte, Alshon Jeffrey, and like Martellus Bennett. So I'm with you on that, Bijan's ahead, which kind of caps his ceiling. But if any team's going to do it, like, this is kind of the structure that you see, kind of a 3-headed monster. So I'm loving him, man. Pitts back to prominence. And Drake London, you have to look at it and say, this guy had 17 contested catches. He led the league in contested catches. He was playing on hard mode last year. So it's going to be nice to have some more quality targets this time around.
One thing I'll add with the targets is that Kyle Pitts had a unique combination of super high slot usage with a really, really high depth of target, kind of like Darren Waller. And one thing that we know with tight ends like that is they're going to be as well super susceptible to quarterback play. So Kyle Pitts, if he's running deep down the field compared to others at his position with worse quarterback play, that's really, really going to hurt a profile like his.
And I'll tell you, Charlie Warner, quietly one of the better blocking tight ends available. Falcons bring him in, dude. So that's beautiful. That's like you could get like a Nick Boyle, Mark Andrews situation there if Charlie Warner is just in line, not collecting a lot of targets. That's what I'm hoping. If you're a Kyle Pitts fan, you want to see Charlie Warner on the field a ton, because that means no hand in the dirt for Kyle Pitts.
Some people out there that are panicking and they're like, I don't want another tight end on the field. We just saw that last year with Josh Oliver. I don't think anyone was annoyed with the tight end production they got from TJ Hawkinson. You're going to be just fine if there's a blocking tight end there.
Right. Noah Gray plays like 50-60% of the snaps, right? Like, he's playing like more than half the game, and no one cares about Noah Gray being out there. Like, it's a good thing. You want as many fullbacks and non-pass catching players on the field as possible, because it funnels the targets to the guys that do catch the balls. That's the thing people got to understand. Charlie Warner coming in is perfect, right? You want as many clunky tight ends standing next to your guy. It makes your guy look better. What you don't want is you don't want Gerald Everett coming in and signing with your tight end, which we'll talk about in a little bit. That's the one you don't want. You don't want the guy that doesn't block to come in and stand next to your guy that does block. So Baker Mayfield, real quick. I mean, just kind of expecting what we saw last year, maybe not 13 touchdowns from Mike Evans, but I mean, they're getting the band back together, huh?
Yeah, I don't have too many thoughts. I think it's similar to last year. I'd say Mike Evans looks like a round 3 fantasy pick. That's kind of where he's been in early best ball drafts. Baker Mayfield's just your classic QB2 in Superflex, where you're hoping for the multi-touchdown game. You're not getting too much else outside of that. So he was the QB 17 fantasy points per game last year. And I think we should draft him around there. The one thing I'll say is touchdowns probably come down for Evans. Some chance that overall efficiency can go up because of the quarterback continuity. But I think if we just plugged in last year's stats for most of these Buccaneers, that's a pretty decent projection as of right now.
Same setup, dude. So I don't mind it. Yeah, and the thing with Baker Mayfield in that format, you're happy to have him, because it gets dicey. At least he's consistent to some degree. Russ Wilson, because of the offset language in his contract, able to sign for the veteran minimum, sticking the Broncos with a huge bill. But what do you think for Pittsburgh? Also, in conjunction with this, of course, is the Deontay Johnson trade from the Steelers to the Panthers. So now, at this very moment, you're looking at, George Pickens, Pat Fryermuth, and the running backs. There's room for, I feel like, Muth to be finally have the breakout season. I've been fading him this entire time because I'm like, he's not a top 2 target on the team, but now the window's there. Or do you think maybe they draft somebody lucky? What are your feelings right now with the direction of this team?
I think they're going to draft a wide receiver fairly
Yeah,
early. I don't know if that necessarily hurts Fryermuth. I think there's still a chance he can be the number 2 option. So I was actually the most excited about him when
yeah,
Deontay left and when Russ is coming in. I'd say this just nukes Kenny Pickett. I have no interest in him in any format.
fine.
The fact that they're bringing Russ in at this stage when it's only year 3 of his rookie deal shows that they've basically given up on Kenny Pickett. Him being healthy and them starting Mason Rudolph over him last year also kind of confirmed they've given up on Kenny Pickett. Russ was the quarterback 12 in fantasy points per game last year. I think that's most people don't realize that. I think this year he's probably just a fantasy QB2 type, like Baker Mayfield. I couldn't tell you right now who I prefer.
Yeah,
I'd say that with Arthur Smith, it's gonna be a really run heavy offense. That doesn't necessarily hurt Russ. He had that pretty much his entire Seahawks career and did just fine. The big difference here is that the supporting cast won't be quite as good now that Deontay's gone. I think George Pickens, some people are going to get carried away. I think he's Cortland Sutton in terms of what we should expect. Maybe a touch better since he's got a little more juice. But the guy I'm more excited about is Pat Fryermuth, depending on what they do in the draft.
yeah. And I've been pointing out to people that people are like, oh, Russ doesn't throw to the tight end. Russ, like many quarterbacks, is going to throw to his best pass catchers, right? So for many years, if that's DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, the tight end is not going to be able to break through that. You go back to when he had Jimmy Graham, and it was basically Doug Baldwin and Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham did have back-to-back 96 target seasons. He had 10 touchdowns, and that was coming off a patellar tendon. Larky, how many
Mhm.
how many players have you seen come off a torn patellar tendon and even play again? Like, it's Jimmy
Mhm.
Graham and like Jim Leonard. Like, that's it. Like, if people, when you go back through and wonder, oh, what happened to Cadillac Williams? What happened to Victor Cruz? What happened to Gerard Mayo? Like, that particular injury is kind of a death sentence. So the fact that he was able to feed Jimmy Graham 100 targets in those conditions, I have no doubt in my mind that Russ, if Freiermuth is one of the best 2 pass catchers on the team, is going to be just fine. So just had to get that out there because it's been bugging me on my timeline. People are like, oh, Arthur Smith, blah, blah, blah. Like, Kyle Pitts he was a top 10 in targets last year for tight ends. He had the same number of targets as George Kittle. It wasn't a
Mhm.
Arthur Smith problem. It was a Desmond Ritter problem. But again, this isn't the Andrew Cooper bitches about tight ends on Twitter hour. This is the Josh Larky analyze free agency hour here. So let's get back to it. Gardner Minshew to the Raiders to compete with Aiden O'Connell. I feel there's some Aiden O'Connell loyalists out there. There obviously Minshew mania has its own crowd. What do you make of it, man? What do you think? And also drafting a quarterback obviously still on the table. So how do you feel about it, man?
Yeah, I think this just makes it seem like they're going to draft a quarterback this year, next year, probably this year. I don't have much interest in Gardner Minshew. Uh, they let him let it rip this past year in Indy. He had 3,300 yards passing and 15 passing touchdowns. That's just really, really hard to get excited about that. I'd say this more raises the floors of these Raiders pass catchers. Whoever it ends up being, I think there's still a chance Devontae Adams isn't there this next year. Minshew, just very, very little fantasy interest. I think the Raiders could be quite bad this year. But
Yeah.
I do think he wins the job over Aiden O'Connell. I don't see how he doesn't, honestly. And especially 2 years, 25 million. That's not backup quarterback money. We'll call that bridge quarterback money, which is why I think the rookie's going to come in.
15 million guaranteed. That tells me that Minshew over AOC at least. And then when we get to the rookie, we get there. Devontae Adams. I think Devontae Adams leaving is crucial if you're a Michael Mayer truther or believer. Right now there's just no possibility with Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers that he ends up be getting meaningful targets. So if you're rooting for him, that's what you need to see. That's the number one thing you're rooting for. Jacoby Brissett to the Patriots, a familiar face for Alex Van Pelt. Any thoughts on there, or just still drafting a quarterback, or do you think maybe they draft Marvin Harrison? What are you thinking on that?
I think they still go quarterback. You don't get to pick in the top 3 very often. I think this is the veteran mentor for whoever it is. He was taken by the Patriots in the 2016 draft originally, which is kind of fun. So it's the nice little homecoming.
Yeah.
Not too many thoughts here. I'd be surprised if Jacoby Brissett starts games for the Patriots come October, if not sooner.
Yeah, I like that. And I, as a Patriots fan myself, I like it because it's like you got a guy, Alex Van Pelt, that he can teach, he can help teach. At this stage, he knows that his job is also going to include, I'm sure when they signed him, they said, hey, by the way, don't be pulling a Brian Hoyer with Johnny Manziel here. Like if we draft a quarterback, you need to teach him how to play and teach him the system. So I'm sure they've covered those grounds. But yeah, I do like that. And I will say the Patriots, if you look at all the little moves behind the scenes, like the Ben McAdoo signing, that tells me that they're really taking quarterback seriously. Apparently, he is some kind of like He liked Lamar Jackson. He liked Patrick Mahomes. He's got some little quarterback whispery stuff going on. That's what I've been hearing. So I'm going to throw these names at you, and you just grab onto whoever, because we got to get to the next position here. We got Jameis Winston to the Browns, and you can hit on them all if you feel like it. Jameis Winston to the Browns, Tyrod Taylor to the Jets, Sam Darnold to the Vikings, Drew Lock to the Giants, which I find interesting, and Marcus Mariota to the Commanders, which I know you find interesting. So what are anything there that really jumps that we can get excited about, or even kind of be like,
We'll hit these rapid fire. Jameis Winston to the Browns. It's like the Joe Flacco experience again. He probably saw them let Flacco let it rip. He wanted in. Tyrod Taylor will back up Aaron Rodgers, raises the floor of these guys if something happens to Rodgers again. I think Sam Darnold and the Vikings is interesting. I think there's a good chance he's their week 1 starter. I think it's increasing the odds they take a quarterback in round 1. Justin Jefferson is no longer a top 3 pick in fantasy. He's a late round 1 pick.
Wow.
Some people out there have been a couple viral tweets about Justin Jefferson without Kirk Cousins in those 4 games. And they're like, guys, he was averaging 20 fantasy points a game. He's fine. Folks, in those 4 games, that this very small sample, Justin Jefferson faced the Lions twice and the Bengals once. Those are 2 of the 3 worst secondaries in the NFL last year. And the one game where he faced the Packers, which is kind of an average secondary, he had 5 catches for 59 yards.
Right. Yeah.
We should be concerned about Jefferson.
People forget
I don't know what's going on here.
The Bengals last year let both their starting safeties walk in free agency, and then went in with like the top was off the defense. It was just like, yeah. I mean, so it is scary. I will say that. I'll say that if that's where we're putting Jefferson, you're not going to have a lot of Jefferson, which I think honestly, there's just, if Sam Darnold, there's too much volatility with the first round pick. It really is. Like there's just too many safer players for me. Drew Lock to the Giants. Yeah. I'll just say quick. I've given a take on this one already. I think it's great. I think it's a great decision, because now you find out, Daniel Jones against a replacement level guy, if they both look average, get them both out and move on. Like, so I love that idea. And then Mariota to the Commanders. Larky, talk to me.
Yeah, he's reasonably close stylistically to Jaden Daniels. Has very little in common with Drake May. Maybe that increases the chance that they take Daniels. Though before that happened, the Commanders had brought in Eckler, and I said this increases the chances they take Drake May, because why would you sign a veteran pass catching specialist only to take a super hyper mobile quarterback? So I think it's interesting because we have kind of conflicting moves. I'd say the Mariota one's a stronger signal that they would then take Daniels, but it's worth noting that why would you bring in an expensive veteran pass catching running back to then take a guy that I've comped to like a Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson type?
Dude, I was doing the same thing with my Patriots. I was doing the same thing. I was sitting here and I'm like, okay, Alex Van Pelt, right? If they bring in Flacco, then maybe we're taking Drake May or JJ McCarthy. If they bring in Jacoby Brissett, then maybe they're leading Daniel. So I was doing the same thing, dude. That's interesting, man. So we'll have to see, man. We'll have to see. That's gonna be cool. For unsigned guys, you got Ryan Tannehill, Tyler Huntley. And those are the 2 that are most interesting for me. Tannehill might be going the Andy Dalton route at this stage, maybe. Kind of somebody signs.
Yeah, I don't have too many thoughts. I think Tannehill could start on the Broncos right now. That's about it. I'm not super excited about any of these guys. It's a pretty deep rookie class for quarterbacks.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let's talk about running backs then, because this is where there's been some mega moves. Number one here, Saquon Barkley, the big dog, signing with the Eagles, and boy, is the Giants subreddit not pleased with that. And neither is, Tiki Barber is like, you're dead to us, right? Like people are not
Mhm.
liking that, but I mean, come on now. It's a business after all. But what for fantasy football, what do you think about Barkley to the Eagles?
I'll probably come in a little bit below market on Saquon.
Me too.
Uh, it's not a great landing spot for him specifically. I think his rushing efficiency is going to be awesome. It's just really unfortunate that rushing doesn't score fantasy points for running backs. The receiving upside is heavily tempered. DeAndre Swift caught 39 balls for only 214 yards last year. Before that, he was averaging 55 catches for 421 yards in his two prior seasons, and he played fewer games on average in each of those two prior seasons. So essentially, halving, whatever the word is, halving. We cut in
We got you.
half his receiving production. And the other issue is the tush push. I think if you're bullish on
Yes.
Saquon, you're like they brought him in to take the tush push to preserve Jalen Hurts. Maybe,
Imagine.
maybe, but I also am old enough to remember Jalen Hurts just giving you double digit rushing touchdowns each year, and I think there's a good chance that happens again. So I actually don't think this was the right landing spot. I think if someone like Derrick Henry went there, that would have been great. But if you're nuking receiving upside and potentially hurting touchdown upside for Saquon, I'm just not that excited.
I'll pull that spoiler band-aid off right now. The best QB sneak team in the league is not going to stop doing QB sneaks. Okay, like that's still going to happen. And I'll tell you what, I'm fully with you, man. If this was fantasy baseball, and I know you had some fantasy baseball background, you worked for a couple of baseball teams. Is that not correct?
Yeah,
In the
the
past?
the Tigers and Padres.
Yeah, that's cool, man. But if this was a fantasy baseball categories league where one of the categories was yards per carry, then that would be great because I think Saquon Barkley, as you allude with the RPO, he's going to be efficient between the 20s. But I mean, we need receptions, we need touchdowns. That's what I care about. So I wanted Barkley to go to the Texans or a number of other teams that didn't have mobile QB. So I'm
Mhm.
with you, man. I'm not as fired up as you. I'll probably be below market. Josh Jacobs to the Packers, corresponding move to Knicks, Aaron Jones. What do you think about that spot?
This is the one I'm bullish on. I think this was the perfect landing spot for Josh Jacobs. We like this offense. Jordan Love's an ascending quarterback. They've got great receiver talent, scoring potential. I I think Josh Jacobs is back to being a round two fantasy pick, maybe early round three at the worst. Very little touch competition there right now. It's a weak running back class in the draft. So I think somewhere between 2022 and 2023 is what we should expect. That's a pretty wide range, but I it wouldn't shock me if it's closer to 2022 than it is 2023, just because he didn't have as many touches this past season.
Right. And LaFleur kind of wanted a Derrick Henry bruiser type, and he got, that's what the AJ Dillon theory, right? And he got probably right now the best young bruiser that can also catch. So I mean, it's just
Mhm.
match made in heaven. Speaking of Derrick Henry to the Ravens. For an NFL fit, I think that he, it's a pretty good fit for fantasy. I mean, Henry never really was a pass catcher anyway. So I mean, what do you think?
Mhm. Yeah, actually, before this, I'll give one spicy take. I don't think Saquon and Josh Jacobs project all that differently for this next season. I might even prefer Josh Jacobs.
Just outright,
I
yeah.
think I think I'm gonna be in the minority there, but I just don't see the massive ceiling for Saquon. Henry, I think this was a great fit. I know he's 30, but he had a PFF grade of 90 this past season. That's elite. Next gen stats, player tracking data had him at zero point 0.3 more rushing yards per attempt than expected this past year. If we look at running back efficiency on the Ravens, it's always awesome. Gus Edwards, 4.9 career yards per carry. He also rushed for 13 touchdowns this past year. J.K. Dobbins, 5.8 career yards per carry. Justice Hill stinks, 4.6 yards
Right.
per carry in his career. I think Henry's pretty in play for close to 300 carries, close to 1,500 rushing yards, 15 to 20 touchdowns. I think he's an early round three fantasy pick in PPR. I think in standard scoring, he's a mid round two pick.
Yeah, I mean, these teams, you gotta remember, man, like these teams that use the fullbacks, dude, that can create some yards before contact. You see it with Kyle Juszczyk and Alec Ingold and Patrick Ricard. Like, dude, if you're a nickel corner and you got Patrick Ricard and Derrick Henry coming through that hole, I'm lying. I'm just lying down on the ground, dude. I'm cool. That's white flag moment for me. I'm making business decisions if that's coming through. So yeah, that's gonna be fun,
Yes.
man. Especially with the Lamar Jackson. With oh man, that's gonna be that team's gonna be scary. We'll say. Fantasy relevant guys. Tony Pollard to the Titans. Hurts the Tajay Spears, does it not? There was some smoke coming out for him. What do you feel about Pollard going there?
Yeah, I don't have too many thoughts on this. It's not a great spot for him or Spears. My current guess would be a 60-40 split in Pollard's favor. You probably don't pay him that much money for him not to get more of the touches. Folks are so obsessed with Tajay Spears' efficiency. It's easy to be efficient on very few touches. People just don't remember that. I always say my favorite example is ask someone, any of your friends, how long does it take you to run a mile? And they might say, oh, I run it in 7 minutes. And then I say, great. So I assume you can run 2 miles in 14 minutes then. And they're like, well, no, because I'm getting tired. That is the same thing with running backs. It's much easier to be efficient on fewer touches. We saw that with Pollard last year. I think Spears is in the same boat. I'd lean Pollard with the contract and with his body of work. Right now, I think Pollard's around 5 or around 6 pick in fantasy, pretty similar to before. And I think Tajay Spears round 9, round 10 pick. So I think the Pollard pretty much where he was being drafted in early best ball and being valued. Spears takes a pretty massive hit, obviously, when you sign a veteran like this.
Yeah, well, then we might as well jump right over to the guy that got the same contract virtually. DeAndre Swift to the Bears, 3 years. So Pollard, 3 years, 24 million. Swift, 3 years, 24 million. What do you think here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty obviously we should prefer Swift. He's going to be playing with Caleb Williams. That's rather play with him than Will Levis. And I'd say that this just completely neuters Roschon Johnson. Some people like him.
No, dude.
I'd consider myself some people. That's unfortunate.
I
But
know.
redundant skill set, DeAndre Swift's just much better. I think Khalil Herbert might be the other guy that gets some touches along with Swift, but I don't think the Bears do this move unless they want Swift to be a heavy touch guy and to be that veteran dynamic presence alongside Caleb Williams. And that's actually a very exciting backfield to have Caleb and Swift back there. It's going to cause a lot of headaches for defenses. So I think right now Swift looks like probably a round 3 fantasy pick.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And I pointed out that like Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson, at least Khalil Herbert can leave next year. Roschon is on a rookie deal. His contract overlaps. The remainder of his contract overlaps with Swift. So he's there. Yeah. He's stuck.
He's dead in Dynasty, folks. This is an injury away running back. There's no standalone value. It's terrible.
Yeah, so that hurts, man. Devin Singletary to the Giants, 3 years, 16.5 million. Motor looked, I mean, he straight up earned the starting job in Houston last year. They're taking, obviously didn't want to pay. Barkley got 3 years, 37 million. Swift is Singletary's 3 years, 16 million. So obviously $20 million difference there. But I mean, what do you think for Singletary here?
I think we know what to expect. 2021, 1,099 total yards, mostly rushing. 2022, 1,099 total yards, mostly rushing. 2023, 1,091 total yards, mostly rushing. You're probably going to get 1,100 yards, maybe 900 on the ground, 200 to 300 receiving. Probably a fantasy RB3 type. I think there could be some spike weeks occasionally. I think the Giants are going to draft a rookie running back. This isn't a huge contract for Singletary, and I think he's going to settle in like he's done for a lot of his career as the 1A in a committee, where maybe he gets 1 or 2 huge blow up games, but I think in general, weekly RB26 type guy.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was like exactly that number all the way through. That's like that year. That's like when Chris Davis batted exactly 247 for 4 straight years. Like that's the guy, and that'll be a fine guy to have. Maybe not super exciting in like best ball where you need spike weeks, but he's a guy. He's just a guy. Joe Mixon. So it was reported he was being released. As often happens, teams, they'll announce that the guy's being released and give teams the opportunity to say, hey, we'll give you a symbolic 7th. A lot of times teams collecting compensatory picks will do that because they don't count against, like Joe Mixon doesn't count against the comp pick formula. So taking Joe Mixon's contract on, if you were collecting comp picks, we don't need to get into the deep mumbo jumbo on that. I got an article on that topic coming out today, in fact. But Joe Mixon to the Texans via trade. What do you think, man? I actually kind of like it. Am I crazy? I know the efficiency's down, but I don't know. I kind of like it. Talk me off the ledge.
So here's a weird one with Mixon. This is the guy in Dynasty that I like.
Oh,
I
okay.
think he's going to
Me too.
produce this year.
Okay.
I want him on my team. Dynasty, what's also nice is not everyone competes that season. You're in a 12-team league, maybe 4 teams are rebuilding. Suddenly it's really an 8-team league.
Right.
Redraft, everybody competes. I think I'm going to like him less than the public in redraft because I think he's sort of a dead zone running back. But in Dynasty, I'm going to be like, hey, this guy's incredibly cheap. Everyone's terrified because they think this is the final year of Mixon and there's going to be no value next year. And I'm like, that's fine. Just give him to me. Here's a 3rd-round pick. It's time to compete. So Mixon looks like the quintessential Josh Larky dynasty running back buy right now.
Me too, dude. Yeah, we talked about that in segment quote unquote segment 2, which was actually the first segment. That you can buy these guys, right? And when you're competing, it's the way to go. And my other half of that philosophy is also that I'll buy injury prone guys in Dynasty because it's so top heavy. My teams are so good because when I'm competing that I don't mind having Keenan Allen because what I do is I put Keenan Allen in my lineup, and then when he gets hurt, I put in another one of my stars from my bench. So I have no problem with the injury prone labels or whatever because it's not like redraft where the assets are allocated so evenly that if you lose a guy, you smoke sometimes. Like with my dynasty teams, if I have Keenan Allen, I'm already thinking to myself, okay, well, I'll have Keenan Allen for all these games, and then for the other games, I'll start, this other amazing player that I have because I'm amazing at fantasy football. So I'm fully with you on that when it comes to buying those guys, especially if I'm competing. You got to know where you're at. So I'm with you. Let's go through some of the other ones and we'll jump over positions. Gus Edwards to the Chargers. Why don't you just let me know if there's any of these guys that pop for fantasy for as immediate buys or sells, given this info. Gus Edwards follows Greg Roman to the Chargers. Zach Moss now in line to start for the Bengals or compete with Chase Brown. Antonio Gibson to the Patriots, 3 years, $11.5 million as a pass catcher that can also return kicks. DJ Dallas to the Cardinals, another guy that you look at the money and ask why. And again, for Gibson and DJ Dallas, is that these guys can return kicks. So it's not like there's a floor to signing a player like that. Is there not? From an NFL standpoint, not from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, I'll run through these. Also mention Aaron Jones, who's on the Vikings.
Oh yeah, I don't know why I should have had him in there.
That's fine. They don't really have a quarterback. Probably not going to be a high scoring offense. I think what you're hoping for essentially is that it is someone like Darnold or a rookie, because then there could be some checkdowns potentially. The problem is that checkdowns are not just a product of quarterback play, but receiver and tight end talent, and it's a really deep room right there with the Vikings in terms of a lot of good options there. So I wasn't super excited about this for Aaron Jones. I know some people were like, oh, he's getting all the touches. It's probably going to be pretty inefficient touches, and he's generally had a touch ceiling just due to his size and injury history. I like Zach Moss on the Bengals a lot. That one really, really stuck with me. He was 6th in next-gen stats for rushing yards above expectation per attempt this past year. He's not a good pass catcher. Running back Chase Brown's probably going to be the 3rd down back if his pass protection takes a step forward. I think Zach Moss looks like a round 7, round 8 pick in fantasy right now. I think he's going to be in on the first 2 downs. He totally remade his game this past year with the Colts compared to what he was with the Bills. So I really like him in a high-scoring offense to be Joe Mixon with slightly fewer catches. Gus Edwards, another really, really good fit. I think we could see what we saw last year. 800 rushing yards, 13 rushing touchdowns. I think that's in his range of outcomes. Not really someone that I'm super excited about for redraft necessarily because it's hard to predict the touchdown spikes. Great best ball pick in those mid to late rounds where you just know that you're going to bank some touchdowns. So that's pretty exciting for me with a good quarterback in Justin Herbert and then a run-heavy head coach with Jim Harbaugh. So Gus Edwards, really liked that one. Another guy that I'm probably going to try to scoop up for cheap in Dynasty because you might not get 2 years out of him. They might cut him after 1 year, but still, it's hard to find 1 year of a guy in a good offense with the right skill set. Antonio Gibson's interesting. Zeke's a free agent. Ramondre's on in the last year of his rookie contract. I think Gibson's an injury away from being fantasy relevant. Maybe there's a little bit of flex appeal depending what the touch split is. I'd say there's a 2-to-1 chance Ramondre's the clear lead back. So I think there's a little wiggle room for Gibson to somehow earn that. So I think he's kind of a good dynasty stash at this point where you might actually get some pretty solid value from him for 2 straight years. And then redraft a good pick. It's hard to find these injury away running backs with the all-purpose skill set. DJ Dallas, he's a returner. I have nothing to say about him for fantasy.
Yeah.
He's never had more than 35 carries in an NFL season. Yeah, we should just
good special teams
someone else
guy.
draft him.
Good special teams guy. I mean, like if you ask a lot of these guys, you ask like, why does Brandon Bolden keep getting signed? Well, it's because Brandon Bolden plays on 6 special teams units, right? And that's what DJ Dallas keeps getting signed. Is that he will return kicks, he'll tackle guys on punts, dude. He'll do all those things. His presence saves you multiple roster spots, right? If you can have a guy that can be a backup at running back and he's on multiple special teams units, that's multiple other players that you don't need to have as the part of your 53. And then now you can go out and get some specialty players. You can have a fullback, you can have a blocking tight end, right? So these guys are valuable in that sense. And I will say, going through these, yeah, Zach Moss, man. I mean, that's it's a vote of confidence to get rid of a guy that took a discount to stay, not just last year and this year, and cut and trade him away to bring this guy in, dude. You have to be pumped on that. And the last thing I'll say on the running backs is with guys like Gus Edwards, Greg Roman doesn't really like going to a running back anyway. So I'm glad that's the player that went there. Same with like Nick Sirianni doesn't call running backs greens. That I don't like that for Saquon. I wanted we wanted, that's where you want like Derrick Henry or some plotter to go to those spots. You don't want the pass catching guys. So yeah, I'm on board with that. All right, let's get to wide receivers. First one, why not hit on the Jerry Jeudy trade? Jerry Jeudy traded to the Browns for a 5th and 6th round pick to join the squad over there. What are your feelings on that, man?
This one's kind of interesting. A lot of it hinges on Deshaun Watson. Judy's always been pretty solid. Maybe he hasn't lived up to his first round billing, but per 17 career games, he's at over 900 receiving yards. There's just been a lot of injuries. I think he's ahead of Elijah Moore at this point. And I think there's some chance he can usurp David Njoku. We all love David Njoku. It's so exciting. I think you remember that it kind of happened for him this past year, and that's been it. Amari Cooper's also getting up there, around 30 years old. So I think it's really just going to hinge on Deshaun Watson, but I think it's interesting because I'd say Jeudy has actually shown an underrated ability to earn targets at the NFL level.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm with you, man, that Jeudy, the battle is now short term. It's Jeudy versus Njoku, right? Because Amari is going to get his. Long term, this could be the spot where Jeudy turns it around, dude. And people say what you will about Deshaun Watson. Like this guy, if you sort all quarterbacks all time by fantasy points per game, he's top 5. So it's in there. He's capable. We'll have to see how he bounces back, but it's entirely possible that this offense does produce a lot of fantasy points. So, going through it, we got Michael Pittman. He's back. Good. Yay. Mike Evans. He's back. Good. Yay. We already kind of talked about that kind of stuff. T. Higgins. He's been franchise tagged, but he wants a trade. Do you think he gets traded?
I don't know. I could see it happening. It's so hard to predict these trades.
Right.
I'll say that T. Higgins gets a bad rap. I think he's awesome for fantasy. He's the kind of player I'll generally like more than the market because people hate when a guy plays and gets injured early. Well, throughout 2023, he dealt with like 4 different injuries and backup quarterback play. 2022, he left 3 games super, super, super early that year, and he was on a pace of over 1,300 yards in those full games. 2021, same thing. 1,100 yards in the season, but he missed 3 games. Again, a 1,300-yard pace. He's kind of been consistently a 1,300-yard pace guy whenever he's healthy. And like you said, with these injury-prone guys, we don't really know when it's going to come together for them. T. Higgins looks like a pretty locked-in fantasy wide receiver 2 type, and I'm excited if he stays with the Bengals for this year.
Yeah, people also have to realize that T. Higgins has the harder job. His presence makes life easier for Jerry Jeudy. He's the one that has to tether his foot to the line and fist fight these guys on the jam and be the outside guy while Chase, gets to go in motion and do all that stuff. It's like the Chris Godwin versus Mike Evans argument. Like Chris Godwin at certain points was scoring more fantasy points, but was he a better wide receiver? Hard to say. Mike Evans had the harder job. He's the one that has to literally fist fight Marshawn Lattimore while Chris Godwin would run around free. So T. Higgins, we don't know, if he does end up getting traded where he can be a true focal point of a team, maybe now is when we do see the T. Higgins come out and have the 1,400, 1,500 yard seasons that we see from the very top dogs. So I'm with you. I like Higgins, man. For me, he's fine either way. If he stays, great. If he goes, he'll be fine. I just think he's a good player. So we got Moondog to the Falcons. The fact that we didn't even talk about him when we talked about Kirk Cousins probably tells you everything you need to know. I think
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Moondog, he's great from an NFL standpoint for the team because he can stretch the field on the outside. But I think that's not going to translate to big volume or big fantasy points. I think it just helps the other guys, right?
Yeah, the one thing I'll note is he's one of the rare receivers that I think that has shown he's good enough at times to be one of an offense's focal points. Should Drake London or Kyle Pitts get hurt, I think Mooney could be fantasy relevant. But on day one, I think he's going to project for like 5 or 6 fantasy points.
And I want to sneak this in there. People are giving Tony Pollard, they're giving him a pass. They're saying, "Oh, Tony Pollard, he didn't feel right until week 11, right?" And because he was coming off ankle surgery, he had the tightrope surgery. Darnell Mooney had the same exact injury, same exact surgery. So if he didn't look right to you last year, like when I was watching, he didn't look right. That could be part of it. So maybe he
That's
does
good insight. Yeah.
have a little bounce back. Same injury, same surgery. And people were like, Tony Pollard. And I bring up Mooney, and they're like, no, shut up. So
That's
we'll
sharp.
have to see.
Yeah.
Gabe Davis signed with the Jaguars. And basically, it sounds like the market here was we don't care which one we get, Mooney or Gabe Davis. It's same deal. 3 years, $39 million. So, I mean, what do you think about who would you rather have if you were doing let's say you were doing an underdog best ball? You taking Moondog first or Gabe Davis first?
I'll take Gabe Davis, but
Okay.
I don't feel necessarily good about either. I think this is lesser Calvin Ridley. I think he's more of a best ball only pick. I mean, Davis couldn't really put it all together consistently as Josh Allen's wide receiver 2. Now he's going to be the third pass game option behind Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. Another guy that really just needs an injury to happen, or else he's probably not going to be fantasy relevant outside of a couple big and unpredictable spike weeks.
Right. He couldn't get more targets than a rookie Dalton Kincaid, who was mixing and matching with Dawson Knox and missed a game. He's not going to come in and get more targets than Evan Ingram, who just had the 4th most targets of any player. It's just not not happening. So I'm with you on that. Third fiddle again. It's like there's a lot, at wide receiver. There's a lot of these like double handcuff pluses where if either one of them goes down, same with like Dallas Goedert. If either wide receiver goes down, now he's got some upside, but for the most part, I'm not really super excited to have those guys. Kendrick Bourne back to the Patriots. Good locker room guy.
Yeah, not much to say there. Coming off the ACL tear, I think you're going to get 600-700 yards. Last round best ball pick, maybe. Should be off the redraft radar.
Yeah, I'm with you. And let's not talk about Noah Brown or Devin Duvernay or Isaiah McKenzie. Last wide receiver, real quick thoughts on. We talked about the other side of this trade with Russell Wilson, but Deontay Johnson on the Panthers. Interest level.
Yeah, I'll hit on Deontay, and then I'll mention a quick thing on Noah Brown because I think he's interesting.
Ooh, okay.
So Deontay, he's elite at getting open. We just saw Adam Thielen get 103 catches last year from Bryce Young. He was in his mid-30s. I think Deontay can hit 120 catches if he stays healthy. I think we should think of him like budget Amon-Ra St. Brown right now for fantasy football. I think he's a round 3, round 4 turn pick. I'm very excited.
Okay.
Bryce Young is just good enough. Deontay Johnson is actually awesome at getting open, which is the one thing the Panthers didn't have last year. This was, I think it couldn't have been a better trade for them, and it couldn't have been a better landing spot for Deontay. And then Noah Brown, he had games last year with 172, 153, and 82 receiving yards. Yeah. Great later round best ball pick. And I think he's quietly another guy where he's got the injury contingent fantasy upside. Something happens to Nico Collins, Tank Dell, which I think especially for Tank Dell, pretty bad track record of receivers that size staying healthy. It's a contact sport. Anyone that weighs less than me, folks, if you're watching this video podcast, I'm not a huge guy. I weigh more than Tank Dell, and I'm a similar height. That's concerning.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And that's the thing. The one thing holding Noah Brown back without the injury is they use the fullback in that scheme, which is always going to hurt the wide receiver 3. But like you said, when Tank Dell and Nico Collins are out, monster games out of him. And to your point on Deontay Johnson, I mean, I know we're talking fantasy relevant stuff here, but they went out and signed 2 of the top guards. Like they are taking it seriously there about getting more time for Bryce Young. So don't be surprised when that team looks better when they have a offensive line. You know, they went out and signed. I think they spent $160 million on 2 guards this offseason. So they're loading up in the middle. They don't want guys getting through. All right, let's wrap it real quick. Rapid fire at tight end. Dalton Schultz back to the Texans. I will say this: Dalton Schultz with Nico Collins or Tank Dell out, 7 targets a game. With both of them playing, 4 targets a game. So be very careful with Dalton Schultz, right?
Yep, same thing.
Yeah, Hunter Henry to the Patriots. This I actually kind of like. What do you think about Hunter Henry with Alex Van Pelt coming to town? I'll throw in this stat: only 2 tight ends last year got more than 20 screens during the regular season. They were Evan Ingram with 21, a guy that led everybody in receptions, and then 19 more receptions than any other tight end. And number 2 is David Njoku with 20. So maybe a little more creativity with the old hen dog.
Maybe.
Come on, get excited with
He's
me.
29. He's got a long injury history. I think he's a fantasy tight end too. I think they're going to add to the wide receiver room. I watched
You're
this
knocking
guy.
him. You're knocking him because he left the Chargers. I know.
I was going to say I
Oh,
watched him multiple years on the Chargers. He's just a dude. Yeah. I'll let you be enthusiastic.
He can win. He can win in man to man. You know what? I think I like him in best ball because he can win in man to man, which that's why he can gets the touchdowns. There's Toronto Dave.
Mm-hmm.
The Hunter does find his way into the hen house from time to time. But you're right. The volume. Yeah, that's our favorite saying around here for the hen dog. But yeah, I mean, you're right that things would need to drastically change for him to be a big volume guy, and he also is slow. Right? He runs the same 40 time as Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz only had one 1,000-yard season. He needed 156 targets to get there. So Henry, to be the breakout, he would at 29, he would need to pull a full-on Gary barn burner Barnage and get like 140 targets. So I don't know if that's going to happen here, but we'll have to see. Let's go through some others. Noah Fant back to the Seahawks.
Worst landing spot.
Oh, I say worst landing spot. He could have gone anywhere. It's like go
I have
anywhere
nothing
else
to say. He chose the spot that's literally going to give him the least amount of usage.
Dude, it's like then they restructured Tyler Lockett. It's like, dude, what are you doing? If you want the football, go anywhere else. Anywhere else. I hate it. Gerald Everett goes to the Bears where they already have Cole Kmet, but I mean, I don't know. Shane Waldron with the Seahawks and the Rams mixed and matched the tight ends. So joining a mix and match tight end system kind of stinks. If they do nothing at wide receiver, maybe there's a glimmer of hope. But I mean,
that's what I was going to say is,
yeah,
I think this is just in case they don't get the receiver that they want.
That I would be okay with.
They're not completely out. Then it's they have some type of supporting cast for Caleb Williams, but I don't think this does too much. I think this just hurts Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet's a pretty good blocker. He's also a pretty good receiver. Gerald Everett is only a receiving tight end.
That's the exact example. We talked about it earlier. We talked about Charlie Warner earlier, probably the most fantasy football talk Charlie Warner's ever gotten. Irv Smith Jr. to the Chiefs to try and learn how to play tight ends from Travis Kelce. And then Jonnu Smith to the Dolphins. I love this move for the Dolphins for 2 reasons. One, he's a decent blocker, and he can also catch some passes. Versus Durham Smythe that just blocks. And 2, because he was released, he doesn't count against the compensatory pick formula, right? So doesn't like Christian Wilkins leaves and these guys all leave. You're not putting yourself at risk of losing any of those comp picks by signing Jordan Poyer as well because he was released. Doesn't hurt the comp pick formula. So I like it. But for fantasy, again, targets behind Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, Jonnu Smith, he needs an injury to one of those guys. I think he's probably getting you 50 catches, 550 yards, 5 touchdowns. So that's not quite good enough to start him each week. I think the ceiling's there if one of those guys gets hurt, but you do need them to get hurt. The one other guy I'll mention is Mike Gesicki. Not super interested. We have not seen a tight end reach 500 receiving yards in a season with Joe Burrow. And you might be like, oh, that's because these tight ends were not very good. Folks, Mike Gesicki is he's not very good.
Right. If you love Tanner Hudson, then you're gonna really like Mike Gesicki, right? Like, yeah, they looked at Tanner Hudson and said, how do we do a slightly better Tanner Hudson, right? So there you go. Austin Hooper to the Patriots. Who cares? Harrison Bryant decided that he's just going to be a backup tight end for his entire career, so he went and did that with the Raiders. That's about it, man. That's about it. So about an hour here. I want to give you an opportunity before we jump out. Larky, you're the man, dude. I always love the way you think, dude. It's just you're not, and people get upset because you're not afraid to pour cold water on stuff. Me neither, right? It's like, yeah, this guy needs an injury. That information is so much more helpful than whenever you search a guy's name on Twitter, it's all positivity. It's like, oh my God, Jonnu Smith to the moon. Like negative tweets don't get the attention that they should, but the tweets that pour the cold water on guys are the ones that actually help you win your leagues. And that's why shows like this are important in winning your league. You know what I mean? We'll cheerlead for the guys that we want. Deontay Johnson, 120 targets, 120 receptions. Woo, you know what I mean? But like a lot of these guys, dude, it's not something to be excited about. Tell everybody where they can find you now, where they can get more of this goodness from you.
Andrew, thanks for having me. Folks, go to Twitter at JLarkyTweets. That's where you can find me. That's where all my work is. Currently a free agent, so why not just post everything on the Twitterverse for free for the good people? You can also catch me. I have a weekly podcast at Player Profiler, so look for that. It is The Dominator. Every other week, I have a guest. Every other week, it's a solo show. I'm going to be talking a lot of best ball and dynasty and rookies coming up these next few weeks. And I'll have dynasty rankings out very, very soon with a trade value chart. That way you can essentially use it like a trade calculator. That will be hitting the Twitter very, very soon as I finish processing these free agency moves.
Larky, I was going to let you go, but news just came in. Our producer, John and Pemba, just saying Mike Williams has been released. Can we get a quick thought on that before we get out of here?
It's not too surprising. I think there's still a chance that they re-sign him. He was never going to play on that current contract. So I think the sneaky option that I haven't seen floated out there yet is the Bills.
I would hate that. I would hate that for Dalton. I'm such a big Dalton Kincaid guy. I am looking at a Dalton Kincaid card right now on my desk.
He's much better than Gabe Davis, even coming off the ACL tear, I'd say. So if he went there, I think that's an awesome landing spot. Nice. I still think there's a chance he just stays with the Chargers. We've seen this many times where a veteran gets cut and then they just re-sign at a lower rate. So I think a team is probably going to pay him $9 to $12 million this year. That would be my guess, where he gets eased in the first month and then he's potentially pretty good for the rest of the season.
Right. And not to mention, because he got hurt last year, they could load that contract up with incentives because they're not likely to be earned. Now they don't count against the cap. Something that could be done. So I kind of hope he's back. I hope he doesn't go and hurt my boy Kincaid. Folks, thank you so much for joining in the chat. If you want to support the show, go get a membership at Fantasy Alarm, or you can also support the show directly. Go to myffpc.com, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more. You can get set up with a dynasty team over there. You can draft a new one. You can take on an orphan team, or you can go and do their early best ball contest, which are going on right now. Look, John and Pemba hooking us up with the QR code directly on the screen, or the links in the description. Get set up at myffpc, the best spot for high stakes games. If you use promo code COOP, they'll give you 25 when you deposit 35 or more. That's it for us. We are out of here. From Josh, from me, from John and Pemba. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next week.